I always get the impression that a lot of the commentators see India as a beautiful, all right, attractive maiden who everyone wants to court, all right. But when I talk to other people outside of India, it's more the idea that this is kind
Fat,
of a
ugly maiden.
Yeah.
You wonder why people don't trust America anymore.
Is it trust or is it direction? Is it just the sense that the U.S. is so consumed by internal matters that it can't function?
I think there's another very important aspect. The leaders or the elite of many in the global South have become much more sophisticated. The advisors are much more sophisticated. I read some of the writings or the speeches of ASEAN leaders. Very, very sophisticated compared to 15, 20 years ago, where the US can push them around and give them stories and tell them stories and they believe it. They don't believe it anymore because they've seen not only the hypocrisy of the West, and they've also become much more sophisticated in understanding what's in the interest of their own countries and their people.
Along the economic line, I mean, a lot of people talk about Vietnam and other parts of ASEAN as being replacement for China. I think Vietnam is doing well. They played it very well. They're friendly with the U.S. They're somewhat friendly with China and Russia. I mean, they're playing it in the middle. I mean, and this to me is the interesting part. This kind of active non-alignment.
That's right.
I mean, they're engaging everybody, but they're not jumping on anyone's side.
Or India as well.
Yeah, India
is playing many sides at the same time.
Yeah, but India, I always think, when I appear a lot on Indian TV, and I always get the impression that a lot of the commentators see India as a beautiful, all right, attractive maiden who everyone wants to court, all right. But when I talk to other people outside of India, it's more the idea that this is kind
fat,
of a
ugly maiden.
Yes, a fat, ugly maiden who's just too large to ignore.
That's right.
But I mean, India, apart from the humor, India is really going its own way. It has openly defied the U.S. on Russia. Continues to import missiles and oil from Russia. The only spot that's hard to figure out is the enmity with China. And it's, this border thing has been going on forever. My impression is that a lot of it has to do with wounded pride. That there was in 1962.
Humiliation,
1962, depending on whose side. I mean, the Chinese and most of history says that the Indians
were wiped out.
Well, they made a foray. They
That's right.
made an aggressive move. There was a response by the Chinese PLA, which was humiliating. They had to surrender. There were a lot of loss of lives.
In terms of India and China, I think humiliation of 1962 was one. But there's another very significant humiliation. India is proud of being the biggest democracy in the world in terms of population, and it hasn't achieved anything for its people. 40 years ago, the Chinese GDP per capita was $1 above that of per capita GDP of India. Today, per capita GDP of China is 500% of that of India.
Yeah, but why isn't India moving? I mean, Modi is a strong leader. They for a long time, people said there are just no strong leaders. Now they have a strong leader. He pushes a very, very radical, or at least he dances on the line with the RSS and its Hindutva. But there are 260 million Muslims who are not very happy. Right. There was a statement by the RSS spokesperson, basically saying, kill them all. Or,
That's right.
No, I'm sorry. That was somebody else. That was a cleric. He basically went after, Muhammad.
That's right.
Which is, like going after Jesus Christ in the United States.
Yeah.
It was not received well by the GCC, who unanimously, I mean, this is a
Condemned.
group.
That's
Yeah,
right.
this is a group that only gets together on oil prices. Everything else, well, let's have a little war. But they came together and they said, don't do that. Where is India going? If it's
But you described Modi as a very strong leader. Indeed, he's a strong leader. But what does he rally his people around? It's around Hinduism. It's around not...
So it's faith-based.
Yeah, it's faith-based. And that's very dangerous in a country such as India. And many Indians talk about, one of our biggest strengths is our diversity.
I went to a dinner with who was somebody he was the previous ambassador and somebody who was very high in the government, and I kept asking him, what is India's plan? And he kept replying, it's our diversity. I said, that's a characteristic, it's not a plan. And through the night he repeated and said to me on a number of occasions, he says, Einar, you just don't understand. You have a Western mentality. Diversity is our strength. I said, but diversity has been your weakness. You have strong states within India, a weaker national government. Even with COVID, they weren't able to have a national policy because each province, each state was allowed to decide on its own basis. So, I mean, and that goes, there are a lot of economic issues. Modi said he was going to come in and create a strong national government. For the first few years, remember, it was about, I don't have the upper house.
Currency and so on.
He was going to do all these
That's
things,
right.
but he said he didn't do it because he didn't have the upper house, the Lok Sabha, their parliament. Then he got it, but nothing has happened. I mean, he actually won a pretty good landslide in the last election. The people are supporting him. Despite the fact that they had the farmers, protesting and blocking the roads and things like this, trying to point to their own problems. But he hasn't done it. Why?
I think it's the structure of governance, this pride of democracy, this pride. So like you said, there's no plan. There's no medium-term, no longer-term plan. It's all short-term for political votes. For developing countries, that's killer.
Yeah.
And India there's another opportunism in terms of playing among the big powers.
India has said that they're going to do away with their wheat exports. Then they softened it, but they're not selling any wheat.
No.
There's nothing going out of the ports.
No.
They just took off saying that we won't do it. They're obviously struggling with climate change.
Climate change, absolutely.
It just wiped out, it just literally baked the seeds into the ground. I
Yeah.
mean, there's nothing when you're above 50.
55 degrees centigrade
Celsius.
on the
I mean, you
ground.
can't grow anything.
That's
It
right.
becomes a desert.
How do you
Sure.
deal with 1.4 billion people that
We're
has to
hungry.
be fed? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a real question. They're going to have to buy. They're not in a good financial situation. It's really hard to see how this goes.